Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This trade and free agency period, we are seeing a ton of premiership players moving clubs this off-season in 2024. Jack Graham, the Richmond premiership player, is now a West Coast Eagle. He has activated his right as a free agent. He's being reunited with one of his former coaches in Minnie McGualter, but he has landed in Western Australia. What does this mean for the Tigers, for the Eagles? How big of a win could this be for them? And for those of us that play AFL Fantasy SuperCoach, Dream Team and Keeper, what does it mean for us in 2025 and beyond? Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I trust you're enjoying this series as we look through all of the players that have moved clubs this trade and free agency period. Jack Graham, well, he burst onto the AFL scene in 2017, became a part of that groundbreaking premiership for the Tigers, and really the thing that catapulted him into the Tigers team and has maintained his position through that team is this guy has elite defensive traits. What he did on that grand final, completely shutting down a Rory Sloane throughout the final series too, did plenty of stopping roles, but he's not a one-dimensional stopper only. It's just certainly that's his key strength, is bringing presence and pressure to the contest, using his body to not just create tackles, but also to create shape and opportunities for others in congestion and in clearance opportunities to really win the football. So Jack Graham's a really nice defensive-minded player and has spent his time at Richmond while firstly through the midfield. He's also then spent a little bit of time often through the half-forward line as well, using some of that defensive press and pressure to really see that Richmond team become a dynasty of the past 20 or 30 years in an AFL setting. What does this mean for the Tigers? Well, politely, just more opportunity for kids. They are 150% committed to this rebuild. And Jack, while he's had some injury concerns over the past couple of years, what this really does is it just continues to push the narrative, which is Richmond are all about getting as many kids in the draft in 2024 and 2025, giving them as many opportunities as they can, so that by the time Tasmania hit the AFL system, they've done the groundwork of their rebuild rather than having to fight for scraps of draft capital. Remember what it was like if you were rebuilding around the times of the Giants and the Suns coming through? Your access to high-end elite draft talent just wasn't there. And so with the movements of Graham and the other rumoured players that are coming in, Baker and Bolton on the way out, let alone a Dan Rioli, this is just full rebuild for the Tigers. So that's all it is. It's giving new opportunities to kids. While for West Coast, they're in a bit of a different spot to where Richmond are. Arguably, they're in comparable list positions in terms of their rebuild. I'd say West Coast are a little bit ahead. That could change in 12 months' time, given the swarm of draft assets that the Tigers are about to walk away with. But West Coast really have a gap in their list profile in the mid-20s. They've still got a couple of handy options that are towards the latter part of their career, players such as an Elliot Yeo and a Jeremy McGovern, although not the same type of player of Jack Graham. They're players that are in that ilk. And then they've got a ton of 21 and under options, but really lack in this mid-20s space. And I think that's part of the appeal of Jack Graham, is he adds some wisdom, some premiership experience into this midfield unit and half-forward unit, but really hits in that sweet spot of absolutely mid-20s experience that they've got. Just this void, largely due to the recruitment of Tim Kelly and having no decent draft capital for 2 or 3 years. So that's the big piece of the puzzle for West Coast. You could argue that he's going to sit in the midfield, but I don't think it's a primary midfield spot. Harley Reid is clearly what they're building their future around. Liam Baker, at time of recording, has requested a trade, but it's not landed through just yet. Let's assume that happens. I think he spends a little bit of time through that midfield, and then whether it's positionally off the halfback or half forward flanks. You be the judge. Actually, West Coast will be the judge. Elliot Yeo, I think, still deserves and needs to be in this midfield unit, as does Tim Kelly, for them to be competitive. And then they're hoping an Elijah Hewitt can pick up some ground after injury-interrupted past couple of years. They like Campbell Chesser on the wing, and whoever they get at pick 3, let alone what they do with other picks that they may be able to acquire in the first few rounds of the draft. It's a very midfield favourable draft, so expect them to go and get themselves an inside mid. And I think they're going to let Jack spend a little bit of time rotating through this midfield unit, and that will just add, again, a little bit of protection, stem the bleeding that they've seen over the last couple of years, and just help build some systems and structures and some cultural presence in there. So for West Coast, I think they're really, really happy with this pickup.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
What does it mean for us from an AFL fantasy perspective and a SuperCoach perspective and a dream team and a keeper? But before we get there, just a little flag on Jack that we want and hope to see him back to his full fitness and best. There was a few years there where he played 20-plus games, but a lot of his AFL career, soft tissue injuries, have been a regular occurrence that have just stemmed him getting any level of consistency out of his body. So let's hope that's the case. He only played 14 games last year. Again, injuries really curtailing that. Let's hope from a West Coast Eagles perspective, and for Jack ultimately, that he's past some of those little niggles and we can see him back playing at his best. What did he do last year? Well, no fantasy tons across any of the formats and averaged mid to high 60s, depending on the format that you play. But Jack at his scoring best, he's got some low 80s in there. And while you might be looking, well, low 80s, who really cares? I think he's going to retain forward status that he's held for us now, off and on for the last year or two. I think this could be really interesting, more so for draft than for Classic. In Classic, I just don't know we're going to need to get there because I don't see the pathway of 2 things. One, that he has an extremely exclusive midfield role. I just don't see that. I think they're going to need him to rotate through that spot. While they want to keep protecting the kids in there, they want to also get some stemmed bleeding. And so I see more of a shared role rather than an exclusive role. So that's one reason I don't think he's Classic relevant. The other is, as much as he's great defensively, he'll always score through tackles and as a result get possession and free kick off the basis of that. He's not a high accumulator of the ball. And for him, yes, he's 60s average. For him to really pop for us in fantasy, a low 80s to mid 80s average, honestly, to me, it's just not enough. We need him pushing towards a 90, and I just don't see the pathway of him getting there because he's not a high accumulator of the ball. You might say, well, there's never really been the opportunity. Sure. But when you've got the likes of Yeo, Kelly, and Reed through the midfield, let alone, as I've mentioned, one of the kids that they're highly interested in the draft, someone like O'Sullivan, a Layla, even a Smiley might be someone they're interested in. These are also high volume ball players. So to me, I just don't see in Classic the value worth getting him at this kind of mid to high 60s spot. I'd much rather pick a player that I think's got a more solidified and clear role that'll be at a comparable price point or at a cheaper price point, or spend a little bit more money on the dollar to get someone that I like a little more. So to me, he's not Classic relevant, although there's definitely some value baked into him. Draft, that's clearly the place that I think he's going to pick up some relevance and some value for us. Coaches that bring players over like Minnie McWalter they know what he can do, they know how to use him, and he'll get favourable opportunities. So I think in draft we can expect that he delivers that low 80s sort of average, which again, you might be thinking, well, there's nothing too flash about that. But that's, depending on the format, F2, gosh, even F3 at the very worst, based on what we've seen this last year with a shallower top-end pool of scoring. So I think that's where I'm anticipating Jack to score, around that F3 sort of spot, become a top 30 forward. I think that's within his capabilities and reach. The good news is you should not have to spend a F3 draft capital spot on him. He'll still get missed by some, given the poor average. Others will elevate him due to him being a free agency move and people taking greater awareness of that. So the truth is always somewhere in the middle. I think if you can get him kind of as your just throw at F4 and hope he can jump up a rung to F3. That's probably the ideal outcome. If it goes poorly, at that point in the draft, it's not really a disaster and hurting you too much. I think that's the best possible outcome for us, is we draft him around that 30s sort of forward, hope he can elevate into the next tier up and become a top 20 style of forward, top 30 style of forward. If we can get that's a great outcome for us if we can pull that off. Jack Graham, hugely helpful for the leadership and experience into this midfield and forward unit for the Eagles. For the Tigers, well, all aboard the rebuild train. From a fantasy perspective, classic. You might be tempted, but I don't think you should be. I do not see the pathway. While in draft, absolutely there's some value and some relevance as a mid to late round draft pick. He could be really, really handy in our forward lines because, again, I believe he's going to retain that forward status. But do you agree or disagree on my take about Jack Graham? If you're watching this on YouTube, comment below and let me know what you think. If you're enjoying these videos, make sure you give them a nice thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. These audio podcasts keep dropping out wherever you're listening on this audio podcast platform. You can go and subscribe and listen to the Coaches Panel reviews of these players. In fact, a whole history of podcasts are there. Make sure you go back and check that out while you're there. If you're loving what the Coaches Panel have done, not only in this off-season, but over the years gone by, you can follow and get in touch with us across social media. X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We are posting on all of those platforms and would love to chat to you there. And if you want to join our Patreon, get access to the Keeper League content that is dropping exclusively for our paid subscribers at the moment, you can get that. And also the link for our new merch line in the description of this episode, so you can go and check it out. We'll be back again real soon talking about another player that has moved clubs this trade and free agency period.